Hey, it's been a while since you saw my face. Hola viewer, Ness here. Yes, I am back. For how long? I'm not sure. I hope that I get to create content on YouTube for a while, but with the way my brain works and my self-esteem works, I'm not sure, but let's keep this positive. So if I'm awkward at any point and I'm not looking at the camera the entire time, that is why. I'm not used to talking to a camera anymore. I'm used to talking to myself because I do it all the time, but to a camera. Anyway, so today I decided to come back with the most creative thing that I think that I could ever do that no one else is doing is the mid-year book tag. I haven't talked about books in a long time while talking to a camera, so I hope that this isn't too bad, but if it is, it can only go up from here, I guess. I'm not sure who the original creators of the tag are, but if I do find it, I will link it down below. Creators, I'm not sure. The first thing I want to talk about is what I'm currently reading, and right now I'm currently reading When the Reckoning Comes. I think I'm not really good at categorizing books, right? But if I had to, I would say it's kind of like a mystery, thriller-ish type of novel. It takes place on a plantation, and you are in the point of view of a Black woman going to said plantation from her small town. That's in her small town that she ran away from, never went back, to her white childhood best friend's wedding. So it's a very interesting book that has already made me furious at some points. And I'm also reading on my Kindle, I'm reading For Love or Scandal by J.J. Adia. This author wrote Guava Flavored Lies, which is one of my favorite sapphic novels ever. And I'm not really liking this one so far. I'm only 5 chapters in, so it's a little too early. But I know when I'm gonna like a book and when I'm not gonna like a book. And if I'm 5 chapters in, I'm already not quite understanding what makes these two women attracted to each other. Not a good sign. So here we are. Let's talk about the tag. So the first question is best book you've read so far this year. I'm just forewarning y'all, I'm not gonna have just one answer for each question. It's kind of impossible because I've read over 50 books so far, and I haven't talked about books or really have updated my Instagram with these books, with a lot of these books. So I want to talk about them. The first best book I've read this year was Real Life by Brandon Taylor. This is a character study novel about this man named Wallace. He is the only Black young man in his group of friends. All of them are white. If I'm remembering correctly, they're all queer of sorts, or they're coupled up. And he is also in college, doing, you know, his thing, getting his degree, but also working in a lab. And also in that lab, he is the only Black man. And it is sad. This book is sad. Oh, okay. I know you're a very hungry caterpillar, but I'm not edible to you. Anyway, this book is very sad. It's not an easy read. The writing is so beautiful that it sometimes made me forget how sad this book was, even though I was reading sad stuff. The way that Taylor writes about certain situations and the way that he decides to put words together in a paragraph is so beautiful. I underlined so many parts. I cried at so many parts, but specifically in one chapter that I just cannot talk about because I know that thinking about it, I will be just an immense pain for the rest of the day. I know that this is a lot of people's favorite book, or a lot of people love this book, and I understand why, because I am one of those people. But also, I put it off for so long because there was just something that was telling me that I knew this book was going to be sad. And I will say that it does end in a hopeful note, at least for me. It ends in a hopeful note, and I purchased Filthy Animals and The Late Americans by this author a few months after reading this, because I just want to consume everything that Brandon Taylor writes. Then we have Of Women in Salt by Gabriela Garcia. I started this book, I don't remember when it was, if it was way earlier this year or if it was at the end of last year, because I have it as an ebook, and I was loving it. I was a good percent in and I just had to stop reading it. I couldn't go back to it because I felt like it wasn't the time for me to consume this story. And then Allison from Allison Pages, in her Pocket Pages book club, this was her pick for, I can't remember what month it was this year, but it was a pick for it. And I said, you know what? It's the best time. I'm going to pick up the audiobook. It's on Hoopla. I'm going to listen to the audiobook in pieces, and I could not stop listening to it. It is a multi-generational book. And so each chapter is the perspective of a different woman. And it talks a lot about being an immigrant and being in the United States, quote unquote, illegally. Garcia also touched on the subject of how I know that some Cubans feel when it comes to them versus other Latin people, in regards to like immigrating into this country, how they tend to feel like they're the higher up and how they're not the same as other immigrants. It is a touchy subject, which is why I don't really want to talk about it too much, because I don't have the vocabulary and the brain to put together exactly how I feel and what I think about that. But I think that this book, especially in a certain chapter, it does it in a very perfect way. The last best book that I'm going to talk about for the first half of the year is Happy Place by Emily Henry. I love all of Emily Henry's adult books. All 4 of them. I've read all 4 of them. I have read them in different parts of my life, different stages of my life, and I love them. I will always read and most likely always love anything that Emily Henry puts out in the adult contemporary romance literary fiction genre. I love second chance romances. I love banter. I love friendships as well. And I love self-reflection and characters figuring out who they are, what they love, what they actually want to do with their lives compared to what they always thought they wanted to be. And this book touches up on all of that. And I think that Emily Henry, as per usual, really knocked it out of the park with this one. I don't have a physical copy because, of course, Berkley decided that they wanted to publish it in hardback, which is fine. You know, some people are real readers and they don't care what format their books are in, but I do care. I'm not going to have 3 paperback Emily Henry books and then have a hardcovers for the rest. I'm not doing that. So she currently resides in my Kindle. She will live in there until the paperback comes out. And the paperback better have the same cover, and it better be the same height as the other ones, because if not, Berkley and I are going to have some choice of words. Berkley better be ready to fight. Next question is best sequel you've read all year. So I don't really read a lot of like series, but sometimes I do. And these are the best ones, or the only ones thus far. The first 2 books that I started the year off with was A Song for the Wild Build by Becky Chambers. I read this book the first day of the year, and then I followed it up with A Prayer for the Crown Shy, which is the second and last book in the Monks and Robots duology. Becky Chambers just knows how to write cozy. I know that obviously the Long Way to a Small and Green Planet is going to be different because it's more sci-fi, and I know that there's 4 books and they're whatever, but these books are so cozy, and I think they are the perfect book to read, duology to read back to back. It has a way of exploring humanity in a way that that makes you sit there and really think and digest everything that you are reading. And I think that the sequel to this one is really good. A Song for the Wild Build is really good, but A Prayer for the Crown Shy will really hit you. Like, this is setting up for this book. Like, Chambers really just did it with this one, basically. I know that everybody talks about this duology, and with good reason. I definitely am going to reread these probably before the year is over. When times are hard, I'll definitely read them. Next is a manga series. and it is the Boys Run the Riot series. There are 4 volumes, and this follows a transgender boy, Ryo, who is dealing with being transgender and hiding that from his family, and trying to navigate life, his teenagehood, being trans and no one really accepting him. Then he comes across another guy who ends up being his classmate, who is also very judged by who he is because he's been held back. He looks a certain way. He doesn't really conform to what a society expects of him. And they find this love for clothing and design and fashion, and it just follows them trying to pursue not only this clothing line, but also who they are as people and accepting themselves. This is beautiful. I think that everyone should read this as well. This is my favorite series. I remember buying the first 2 after seeing it on Instagram, and I'm like, okay, I'll read them eventually. I couldn't stop reading it. Immediately went out and picked up the other 2, read it, and I know that I will always return back to these. The way that it touches on the subject of being transgender, but especially in Japan, which is not something that I see a lot. Seeing these 2 guys have a love for fashion and designing and art is just, it was just very beautiful. And the last volume was very emotional. And then the last thing I'm going to talk about are the sheets, delicates, and also the 3rd volume lights. I read Sheets a few years ago, but I reread it this year because I wanted to get to delicates, and then also I had to put in a request for lights. And so ow. Sorry, Lily, I forgot you were under there. Sorry. Oh, Lily, you don't have to go, honey. I'm so sorry, mommy. My tailbone hurts. I've upset the little tiny baby girl of the house. So I wanted to reread Sheets, but Delicates I did read this year, and Lights as well. Brenda Thumler is just amazing. She's an amazing artist. She's an amazing storyteller. And I never thought that I would feel so many emotions for a ghost covered in a sheet. This graphic novel series just touches on so many things. Sheets touches on grief and loss and what that looks like when you are a child yourself and you are also grieving but aren't really given the space to grieve because everyone else in your family needs you. Delicates touches on making friends, and if your friends aren't really nice and they're not the best people, but also new friendships with someone who has never really had a friend in their life because they're considered weird and they love talking about ghosts and taking pictures, and no one really understands that the world isn't made for people like me. And then Lights is just really, really, really sad. And it touches on friendships and what that's like, what it's like when you want to be, have 2 different friend groups, but also, just want to be yourself. And it's difficult because you don't want to let anybody down, but your happiness and your comfort also matters. Lights destroyed me. She tells these stories in such a delicate way. I want to read everything that she ever comes out with, and I know that she's supposed to come out with like a Western graphic novel, I think next year, and I'm reading that too. There's nothing really about Westerns that really attract them to me, but Brendan Thumler and another author that I will be talking about later, they can get me to read anything. New releases that you haven't gotten to that still want to get to this year. A lot. So we have Yellowface by Art Plong. This is the Waterstones edition, and it looks like a lace. And this one's also signed. I know that Yellowface is loved, but also disliked. Whatever. I don't want to know anything about other people's opinions. I do want to do a reading vlog for this one. Mortal Follies. This also came out this year, and I did start it during my reading slump. I got 16 pages in, but the narration style Like, the point of view style of this book is a little strange for me, and it's been difficult for me to get into. This is how you know I've been in a reading slump, because I've had volume 4 of Lore Olympus since it came out the same day as Mortal Follies, and I still haven't read it. I love the smell of these graphic novels. Other books, You Don't Have a Shot by Raquel Marie. I've also started this one during my reading slump. This is the same author as Ophelia After All, which was my favorite young adult novel that I read last year. So I definitely need to read this one. Other books that have come out this year that I've purchased. We have An Island Princess Starts a Scandal by Adriana Herrera. It's a sapphic story, so of course I picked it up. The Fiancé Farce by Alexandria Bellefleur. Again, sapphic. Have bookmarks. All these books have bookmarks in it, where I started it and I've just been in a reading slump. And then we have That Summer Feeling by Bridget Morrissey. I also was dying for this book to come out. I still haven't read it, and I know there's a spicy sex scene in here that I like, just ooh, and I saw it, I was like, ooh, can't read that yet. And then also, of course, The Late Americans by Brandon Taylor. Again, I don't know anything about this book. What I do know is that my Barnes & Noble did not have it out when I went to go buy it for $28, and it took a whole team to try to find it because they had it in stock. They just didn't know where they had it. So I hope they put it on the floor, because it's what Brandon Taylor deserves. Next question is upcoming releases that you're looking forward to. And of course I have like a full list. So we have Family Lore by Elizabeth Acevedo that comes out the 1st of August. This is her first adult published novel. And then we have Vampires of El Norte by Isabel Cañas. This is the author who wrote The Hacienda, which was my #1 favorite book of last year. This is a Western type of book. I don't give a fuck about Westerns. They're not my thing. I don't like Western movies, Western shows. Just the topic of Westerns, I don't like it. They're just not for me. But if she is gonna write a Western, I'm going to buy it and I'm going to read it, and I'm most likely gonna love it. That one comes out on the 15th of August. Then we have Iris Kelly Doesn't Date. I can't wait to read this one, the 3rd installment, because both of the women on the cover are my type. And I know that I'm gonna gay panic the entire time I read that book. And I can't wait. Gay panics are good for the soul. Next question is biggest disappointment this year thus far. First one I want to talk about is Hellbent by Leigh Bardugo. This is the follow-up to Ninth House, which came out a few years ago. And I did it to myself. I didn't like Ninth House that much, but I really do enjoy Leigh Bardugo's writing. It's just something about this series in particular I do not like. And yet I spent my money back in January, if I'm not mistaken, to buy this book and read it. And I disliked pretty much every moment of it. And I was really excited because I thought, you know, it's been a few years since we got Ninth House. Leigh has had enough time to really figure it out, basically. I don't know. Ninth House just has so much potential for me. I love the idea and the premise of it. I just do not like the way that Leigh Bardugo executed it. If I had to read about a character's erect penis one more time and Alex becoming a literature girly, I was gonna fucking lose it. There's side characters that I like, and Alex has funny dialogue or whatever the fuck else, but like, there's just so much that happened in this book that was introduced into this book that made me just roll my eyes. Am I going to read the 3rd book? Probably, just because I want to know how it ends. The next book is The Writing Retreat. I buddy read this with my friend Christy. We buddy read a book every month. Or at least we try to, and it's my fault if we don't. This follows a woman who is a writer or whatever, and her friend like enters her into a competition or some shit, and then they go, like, she is accepted and she goes, and then when she goes, she sees that her ex-bestie is there too, and they have like bad blood or whatever. No Taylor Swift. This book was just ridiculous, and not in the way that I like ridiculousness. no MTV. If I had to read about somebody's pussy getting ate one more time, it felt convoluted. I don't like this book. I don't like the turns that it took. I didn't like the decisions that the characters were making. I don't like this book. I don't like this book. I don't get the hype when people are like, I love this book. I know it's ridiculous, but I loved it. Okay, girl, good for you. I'm confused. Also, I hated the narration style because there's nothing that I dislike more than fucking audiobook narrators who whisper and talk like this. And then the dialogue is like this, but then they whisper and it's so mysterious and it's so ASMR. Bitch, don't whisper in my ear. I don't like people whispering in my ear. That's the number one way for me to shove you out of my face. So if you don't want me in your space, just whisper in my ear and you got it, babes. And then last but not least, Pride and Prejudice. The classic literature girlies are lying. All of you. There are instances where I read a book and I don't really like it and then I visited it later on in my life and I love it. I don't think this is going to be one of those books. I physically read this book alongside the audiobook and I still have no fucking idea what happened. It was so boring. This is a romance book? This is the romance book? This is y'all's romance book? This book was so bad that it makes me not even want to watch that movie with Keira Knightley in it. I never want to read that book again. I immediately unhauled it, along with Persuasion and Emma. I never want to read anything from Jane Austen ever again. Next question is biggest surprise, and I have a good amount here. First off, Catherine House by Elizabeth Thomas. Surprise, because a lot of people do not like this book. And I can see why people wouldn't like this book. This was a book that the second that I started reading it, I had to know everything that happened. Wanted to know every character. I wanted to follow the character that we were following the entire time. It gave me the creeps. It gave me the chills. This does have an open, ambiguous ending. And I know a lot of people don't like that. I understand that you spend so much time in a book with these characters and then you get an open ending. You don't get any resolution. How dare you? But I personally love open, ambiguous endings. Next book, Bunny. People talk about this book all the time. It is a online book community beloved book. So I knew that like there's something good about it. There has to be. This book is really fucking weird. It's so entertaining and you question your sanity the entire time you're reading this. And the end, again, is ambiguous, is open ending, and it's just like, what the fuck did I just spend my time reading? I feel like I didn't read it during the right time, but I'm really glad that I did enjoy it nonetheless, and I want to read anything else that Mona Awad puts out. I would not want to be part of this group though. The bunnies, y'all can keep that. The next book is A River Enchanted by Rebecca Ross. Again, I read this in the beginning of the year. And I'm really surprised by how much I really enjoyed this book. This book gripped me from chapter 1. From the first sentence, I was gripped. I was hooked. Rebecca Ross's writing is so lyrical, is so beautiful. It's flowery, but not in an annoying way. Rebecca Ross doesn't give us a single detail that we do not need in this book. Everything that you are getting from the beginning and middle and end is what you need for this story. This is low plot, majority vibe. I'm waiting for Fire Endless to come out in paperback in September. I'm literally buying it and nobody talked to me. Phone is going to be on Do Not Disturb and I'm just gonna like, it's so good. It's so good. Next book that surprised me was Bluets by Maggie Nelson. How can I explain this book? Well, the same way that everybody that I've heard talk about it. It's a woman who writes about falling in love with the color blue, being in love with the color blue, but it's obviously more than that. I do suggest that you listen to the audiobook while reading it physically. While it is short, this is a book that you will need to sit with and really process. And I think that reading it rushily is not the best way to do that. So I was really surprised by this. Next surprise is The Last Tale of the Flower Bride by Roshani Chokshi. I say that this is a surprise because I read The Gilded Wolves by this author years ago. Like, I think I was still making content at that time when I read it, and I was buddy reading it with 2 other people in the community, and I was not really vibing with it, but I think that it is because I read it when I didn't need to. It wasn't my time to read it, right? Because I will say Roshani Chokshi, her writing is fucking beautiful, very lyrical, very flowery, and it's an experience. Her writing is an experience. But when I saw this cover and heard the premise of this book, I was craving it so bad. And whenever that happens, I know that it's going to be a good time with a book, and it was. And you're going between present and past tense, present and past. If you haven't read this book and you like gothic fairy tale books, where it has just magnificent, beautiful writing and it's vibes, it's plot, but it's really, really vibes, and it just immerses you into it where you forget that you're reading. I recommend this book big time. Next book that surprised me was Shut Up You're Pretty. This is a short story collection that follows the same character throughout. So every story is a different part of her life, and it touches on immigrating and moving to a new country as a child, learning what it's like to be a child in that country, wanting to fit in, being poor, whose dog is barking aggressively outside. That's fine, have a good time. It follows her from age 8 all the way until she's in her mid-20s, and it touches on topics of men and older boys being sexually suggestive towards you and what that does to you, and also sex work and family who is so disconnected when you're all going through the same thing, like being immigrants in a different country. This takes place in Canada, and I really enjoyed this. There were stories that I didn't really love too much, but the majority of the stories were 4 to 5 stars. I know this is definitely not going to be a collection for everyone, and I completely respect it, but it was definitely a collection for me. And the last one, Clara and the Sun. This is a story where you're following an AI who is purchased for a girl who is sick. And it's just a story of this AI learning about humanity, what it's like to be human, like what humanity is. This is a book that has really sat with me, that has had me sitting and processing things. It's one of those books that really did a lot for me, where I just have no words for it. I'm not sure how to talk about it. I'm not sure how to describe it to people. I just know that it did a good amount for me, and I really appreciate this book. A new favorite author, I don't really have a new favorite author because I like to read a few books from the author before I'm like, okay, favorite author. New fictional crush, I don't really get fictional crushes. I don't, not anymore. So new favorite / least favorite character. I don't have a new favorite character either. But I will say that every single character in the writing retreat are all my least favorite characters, except one character. She was fine, but all those bitches, I really dislike that book. A book that made me cry, Happy Place, the Sheets trilogy, Boys Run the Riot manga series. I've had a good amount of books that have made me cry this year. Some people are like, I don't really cry. Yeah, no, I cry. Not a lot, but I do tend to cry a good amount when I read. Book that made me happy. I think the book that has made me the most happy this year, Normal People. This was my 3rd reread of this book, and not happy in like a sense that I was smiling and laughing along, but happy that I was back in this book with these characters. I know that Normal People is not for a lot of people, and when I first read it back in the beginning of 2020, it wasn't for me either, but I think that having gone through certain experiences since then, I understand these characters, and even though there are things about this book that I just don't vibe with, I love this book as a whole. So it made me really happy to be back in this book. Next question is the most beautiful book that I've purchased this year. I have 3, of course. The very first one is The Little Prince. I've never read this book before, but I saw this edition and I had to have it. This edition is just so stunning. It's so beautiful. Next book is In the Lives of Puppets by T.J. Klune. I think this edition is stunning. I think it's beautiful. And it's a buttery cover, and this is what the end pages look like. But then I also like this little guy. The last beautiful book that I think is the most beautiful book that I've purchased, Frog and Toad by Arnold Lobel. This is the complete collection, and it is heavy, but it's really, really pretty. Again, I've never read Frog and Toad. I didn't read Frog and Toad as a child, but I don't think it'll take away from what these books will do for me. Books to read before the year ends. Every single book that I'm anticipating, plus every single book that I have purchased this year, to be realistic, these are the ones that I really want to read before the year ends. This Is How You Lose the Time War. I bought this one this year. I know this has been a re-spark of like love and enjoyment for this book lately, and I know it'll confuse me, but hopefully I love it. Then we have The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. I want to finally read this, and like I'm really in the mood for it, so it may be what I pick up next after I finish my current physical read. A Taste of Gold and Iron. I know that Mina and Deanna really loved this book, which is what propelled me to buy it, and I waited until it came out in paperback so that I can read it. It's a thick one though, so I don't know when I'm gonna get to it. Probably in the fall. It feels more of a fall book for me. The Poppy War trilogy for sure. I've started this like twice, but I'm just really intimidated by it, so maybe after I read Yellowface I'll jump into this, but I do want to read this before the year ends. The Song of Achilles. I started reading this years ago, and I got to like page 60 something, and I just lost interest in it. I wanted to read something else. A Long Time Dead. I just came across this on Amazon. They recommended it to me. Amazon may be a piece of shit, but I will say they have recommendations. They have given me recommendations for books that I've never heard of before that I have liked. So anytime they do recommend me something in specific that I've never heard of before, I do buy it. The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. As you can tell, I did start this before, and I did really enjoy it. I got to page 61, but it just wasn't the time for me to read it. Last but not least that I'm going to mention, Gideon the Ninth. I've had this book. This is an ARC. This is my very first ARC that I ever requested, that I ever received, and I still haven't read it. I started it the other day, but it wasn't the time for it. So last question, community members honorable mentions. So we're just gonna pop these in, and then also I'll link them all below. We got Allison Pages, Capri's Book Island, Reading with Kelsey, Stephanie Bookish, Tia Shu, Unclarable, Katie Marie, Stories for Coffee, Riley Marie, Books and Lala, of course. I don't even have to say that. Along with A Clockwork Reader. We all know who those two are. We got Lily Reads, Jamie's Library, Literary Iggy, Allie with Books, Tammy Tries to Read, and A Sunny Book Nook. Wow, shame on me. Cannot believe I did not mention Mina Reads and Maybe I'll Read today. Two of my favorites. I'm sorry I've disappointed you. That was the mid-year book tag. I'm exhausted. I haven't eaten today. I'm hoping to make more content, more like, reading vlogs and things of that nature. Thank you for watching. Again, I've linked all of the questions along with the people I mentioned in the end of the tag. So if you want to check anybody out, that would be really nice. And yeah, I hope to see you next time. Thank you for spending time with me, and remember to love yourself at all phases. Bye-bye.